So we'll kindly ask our second speaker to take the floor right now. And our speaker for today will be Peng. She is a PhD student. She's basically has a heritage from China, so she is definitely the one from whom we expect to possess some significant knowledge in Chinese culture and diplomacy. She's also teaching assistant at Politics SOAS UK, United Kingdom, and her topic for today would be COVID Securitisation and Internalised, Borderland, reconsidering China's border policy with its surrounding countries, specifically Myanmar. And I will kindly ask her to introduce herself probably, and I will give her opportunity to share the screen if it's needed.
Hi everyone. So I'm going to share my screen.
Yes, and just a second, please.
Okay.
Yeah, please. Now you can share your screen.
Yeah, can everyone see the screen? Okay.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Peng, and thanks for the invitation for today's event it's hosted by the Public Diplomacy Foundation events. And today I'm going to give short presentations of the COVID Securitisation and Internalized Borderland, reconsidering China's borders policy with its surrounding countries. And I'm in my final year of my PhD in SOAS. And today's, despite the topics, it's about surrounding countries, but my research field is China's policy with Southeast Asia. So I'm focused. Today's presentation is going to focus more on China and Myanmar. But before that, I'm going to give you different kinds of borders, some pictures, and then here's the outline for today's presentation. And this is some border pictures. The first one, the pictures is all taken by me. The first picture I took is the Polish-Ukraine borders. I went to the Borderland in April this year. As you see, this is the Poland, and that the other side is Ukraine. And this kind of border is quite land-based, right? Very flat and very feasible, convenient borders. And this is the border I took 2019, is China and North Korea borders. This is a river-based borders. As you can see, they are like North Korean people. They were washing their clothes, their cookings. You can see the houses they were living. It's also very easy to cross the border. There are no physical barriers because it's a river base. You can just swim from the North Korea to China. This is a river-based borders. And then here's the photo I took last year in the Thailand-Myanmar borders. And this is the side, that is the side of, that is Myanmar, and this is in Thailand. And why was I in the motorcycle, and then the one like is going to take me to Myanmar. So this is the border, like quite in a hidden way, in the geographically, it's a mountains area. It's not very flat. It's not like flat as the Polish-Ukraine border. It's very flat, and this is the border is quite like very hard to get into, right? And this is the border of the China-Myanmar borders, 2021, and this is the border. You can see there are lots of physical barriers, and the Chinese government established these kind of barriers during the COVID to prevent their COVID cases from Myanmar. So you can see there are different kinds of borders. So here are some border functions. You can see there are borders. The traditional way to understand borders is perhaps is the first one, demarcations of territory, and perhaps this is the basic functions, and the borders donates where one political like the states ends and another begins. So it's kind of like the borders distinguish different states. But in contemporary context, when we are talking about borders, it's usually the functions of control of movements, protection of civilians, cultural preservation, economic purpose. So you can see these borders, the Polish-Ukrainian border, and it has a functions of control the movements, especially they include regulating migration, trade, sometimes even information. But for that kind of borders, it only has a checkpoints. It doesn't have the digital system to record how many people enter Myanmar or enter Thailand. So there are different kinds of border, but in general way, it has 6 functions. So why I focus on the China-Myanmar border, apart from my PhD, that is part of my PhD, but that is not my main PhD topic. But the thing is, the China-Myanmar border is very interesting. It's because it has a security concerns, especially it has lots of ethnic armed groups in the borderland. It poses security issues. If you see the video. Sorry, if you see the video here. This is a video you can see from since 2021, the Myanmar has a military coup. And then this is the clash, different conflict clash in Myanmar. And this kind of clash is also close to the Chinese border as well. So as you can see, most of there are 9 largest armed groups in Myanmar, and most of them, they are actually settled next to the Chinese border. So they have these kind of borders. They are all ethnic armed groups. They are settling these areas. And there, if we look at the economic map, you can see most of the Chinese projects in Myanmar, they need to go through these borders. So these borders, so the Chinese investments in Myanmar, they need to cross the conflict zones to arrive. Like this is the different kinds of investments, like oil investment, natural gas pipe investments. So that means if China closed the border because of the COVID, it will definitely pose huge impacts on these ethnic armed groups. They have no way to survive because they used to rely on the border trade with the Chinese border. So here is just the context of today's research. And so the paper is many talks about the COVID secularization and the borderlands. So what is the role of the border policies in confronting the COVID, and can international boundaries contain pandemics, and what are the impacts of local communities of using borders as a public health instrument, and what do COVID borders closure look like from inside borderlands, and how have the borderland communities respond? In what ways can the border theory enhance both our understanding and respond to global pandemics? And there are some research has already done on COVID to borders. There are research already published in Central Europe, North America, Africa, South Africa and Zimbabwe, and also South America. This kind of research they all have done about COVID and the border management. But here is the questions. So here is the questions is not sufficient to answer. To what extent it was unclear to understand these border managements is the direct consequences of the virus itself, or is the secularization efforts made in responses. If the strict border management is because of the health-related reasons, the Chinese border is supposed to open immediately when the health issues is solved, but it's not. The Chinese border is still closed, despite the COVID is not going to be a threat anymore. So we have to think about COVID is not longer a health issues in China. It's supposed to be a security issues. So that was the term what I called COVID secularizations. COVID secularization is based on the theory of secularizations. that seeks to explain how a security issue can be transformed into a threat that needs to be overcome. So it seems like the Chinese government, they advance COVID from a general health issue to a security issue. And what are the results from this? And the results is what I call internalized borderland. And this is a term also based on previous research. In some previous research, the internal borderland means expand the conventional understandings of the border to like inward, put the conditional borders to inner land. There are also some research about internalized borders of a hybrid nature of the checkpoint systems. So in my article, the article is not published yet, I'm very sorry, just the summary of my article. So the internalized borderlands means it's the process of moving the conventional border to the inner land, or of assembling the border within the known borders. So that means there are, as you can see, there are 18 counties along China-Myanmar border, and the China's government has established the checkpoints among the border counties, apart from the conventional borders. Here is the map, is more easy to understand. So this is the traditional way to understand. This is Myanmar, this is China, and this is the borderland. And this is quite easy to understand from just the Polish-Ukrainian border. It's quite similar. This is quite like international way to understand, conventional way as well. Like two countries, and the middle area is the conventional borderland. But after pandemic, after COVID, what the Chinese government do is that they establish the checkpoints between the border counties. So this is border counties, and they establish the checkpoints among the border counties, but they also establish the checkpoints between the inner county and border counties. So you can see the Chinese government established lots of checkpoints before entering the conventional state borders. That is the result of the result of the COVID securitizations. So here is the videos I can show you about. Here is the video I can show for, I took the videos to show the internalized borderlands. So this is the video. You can see that this is just a minibus crossing from different borders. It's not yet to the conventional border. It's still inside China, and they establish these checkpoints, and they will have the police officers and border guard to come to check your ID, check your COVID certificate. So this is not like before. Before the pandemic, there are no this kind of infrastructure, there are no this kind of setup. And this is only happens after the COVID. So what I will perceive that as a internalized process has two stages. Stage one is non-traditional security, NTS challenge. And now the Chinese government is in the stage two, the COVID and internalized borderlands. But before, the Chinese government has already securitized the borderlands because of the non-traditional threats, such as the drug issues and the illicit activities, such as illegal entry, illegal resident, illegal employment issues. But that doesn't work. Despite the Chinese government strengthened the border control because of the non-traditional security NTS challenge, it's not going to solve the issues until COVID. So COVID is kind of like the Chinese government put COVID as a national threat and used it as an excuse to strengthen the border management and border controls, and put the border control inner lands in China. So this is why I call internalized borderlands. And here are certificates. You have to, when people need to cross the border, cross the different border countries, you need to have the certificates of travel, and it's far more difficulty than a visa. You need different kind of stamps to prove your end of travel, and also you need a COVID test as well. So this is the scenarios of the internalized borderlands, and there are some pictures of this checkpoints among border countries. So here's the final results of what we called isolated borderland. So there are records. This is the records. So this one is the traditional one. Traditional border has closed because of the pandemic, and this is also closed because of the pandemic. But this one closed is because of the Chinese government perceived COVID as a security issue, and they established the second war among the border countries. So what you can see is that there are two layers. This is the first war, and this is the second war. So basically, the Chinese government established two layers, two wars between China and Myanmar. And so far, this border is not yet opened. So here are some results of this kind of the result implications. It's a huge decrease of the border trade, and for the ethnic armed groups, like I said from the first few pages, they need to find another way to sustain themselves. So it kind of like increase different kind of crimes in the borderland, especially the telegram fraud in the China-Myanmar borders. This kind of crime doesn't need massive amounts of labor causing from China. They can just have the telegram fraud from Myanmar side. So it's highly likely because of the China's has that kind of COVID secularization process that indirectly caused the telegram fraud in the Myanmar side. So that was brief. This is references, and this is just a presentation. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, dear Pen. I guess that everyone enjoyed your really thought-provoking presentation, and we can move on to the Q&A session. So, dear colleagues, please raise your hands or just write your question in a chat. It can be in English or Ukrainian. I will gladly help you with translation. Yes, Anastasia Moskalenko, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was indeed very insightful. And I'll have probably two questions grouped in one. So is it some kind of commonplace policy nowadays, or is it only against Myanmar, is the first question. And the second question is there a prospect, in case this is a commonplace policy for other states as well, I mean borders of China with other states as well, is there a prospect for these borders to stay as closed as possible onwards? So to say, is it a trend that will be happening even more, since this is a security issue, as you pointed out before? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Do I need to answer one by one, or?
Yes, you can answer. You can, yeah, I guess
okay,
you can.
I think the question you are saying, is that common issue? Yes, it's quite common. And also the recent news from North Korea. So the North Korea is kind of like learning this kind of thing. The North Korea also established a wall, like physical barriers, and as an excuse of COVID as well, even in 2023. So North Korea is kind of like, they kind of like, I'm not saying they copy China, but they're kind of learning this kind of like using a public health crisis as a way to strengthen its defense systems or strengthen their security or border control system. And there's no way for the Chinese government to give up this kind of war, because the Chinese government, the China-Myanmar borders has over 2,000 kilometers. It's very long, and Chinese government invests so much money to establish this physical barrier. And even COVID is no longer a threat now. There's no way for the Chinese government saying, oh, they're going to destroy this kind of barrier. from my point of view, I don't think it's going to destroy the barriers. So it's kind of like become a legacy of the COVID secularization, and China's government is going to use that as an excuse, saying, okay, for the future border trade, we need more regulations, we need more kind of border force to that. I think there are also similar cases, not just in the China-Myanmar borders, but there are also borderlands in China, Vietnam, China, Laos border, or perhaps perhaps Xinjiang borders as well as China North, China East border. They will, especially the land borders, they will have this kind of infrastructure. But if the border is river borders, it's impossible to do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, dear colleagues, is there any other questions? Since we have some of the questions sent in advance, so probably I will ask a prepared question from our fellows who probably is not there today, but I still wanted to ask Supen some questions. So the first question is from professor of Taras Shevchenko University, and she asked you, is it possible to say that these barriers will be used to artificial isolation of China from neighboring countries?
Yeah, they use the technology of AI as well. I haven't give you the full details. They use specific detections. If somebody crossed the border, and they will have the biological detection to perceive somebody is crossing the border. So they use AI. They do use AI as a main detection for the border management technology.
All right. And the next question is also from Ukrainian colleague. She's also a PhD student. Yeah, Miss Marina Labrenko. She prepared a question regarding why China decided to save those barriers even though COVID is not longer a threat. Is it just bureaucracy, or is there some strategic plan for separation of China from neighboring countries?
Yes, it's a good question, because before COVID, opening the borders, who is the main actors of opening the border? It's not China. It's actually the neighboring countries. They are the the actors that benefit from opening the border, not the Chinese, not the border countries. So it's likely. I think the China's policy towards the borderlands, is more of the security level is increasing. Before the COVID, it's kind of like the Chinese government. They will say the economic activities is very important for the border trade, the neighboring countries. But after COVID, also the dynamic change of the Chinese regime of Xi Jinping. So it's more likely they put security as the equal level, or more important level than the economic agenda. That's why I perceive. So if security is more important than economic, and the Chinese government will say this kind of barriers is going to help the Chinese border controls to regulate this kind of illegal entry or illegal activities. So if the Chinese government perceives security is more important than economic, there is no way for them to dismantle these kind of barriers now.
Right, thank you, Xupan. It's really insightful. And I see that there is no other question, so we'll probably move forward. And the next speaker for today is Dr. Bhavna Davé. She's a representative of Department of Politics and International Studies. She's an academic staff of Center of Contemporary Central Asia and Caucasus. She's also from UK. And her topic for today would be what role can the SKO play in achieving regional security and cooperation in Eurasia? So please, Professor Dave, The floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Professor Dave, we can hear you. Hello.
Okay, yes, hello, Dobry день, привет. I just had one basic question about approximately how many people are listening, because I don't see any photos or anything. I only see myself.
According to my list of participation, there are around 50 people on the Zoom session right now. So yeah, there are around 50 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So before I start, I just thought I'll speak my name, which is Bhavna Davé. I teach in the Politics and International Studies Department at the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. It just so happens that currently, for this 1 week, I happen to be at a retreat center where my goal was to be completely away from news and internet and everything. But then I decided to log in because it's important, I feel, for me to convey my ideas to students and to engage with them. So if you see me in a very kind of holiday mode, that explains it. Okay. And just briefly about my areas of specialization and interest. I teach about Central Asian, Eurasian politics, geopolitics of the region, and my research has been on China, Central Asia relations, the One Belt, One Road, and how it is perceived in Central Asia across Eurasia. Secondly, I have also written a great deal about and done research on the labor migrants from Central Asia in Russia. And finally, also about China-Russia relations. So I decided to talk about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, as one of the key institutions which operates in the Eurasian region. The reason I chose the SCO is not because the SCO is really that important. And the question that I initially posed on the topic is that what role can the SCO play in the regional security structure in the Eurasian region? So if you want a one sentence or one word answer, the answer is it doesn't really have much of a role to play. At the same time, what we see is that there is a lot of discussion on the rise, the emergence of the various non-Western institutional structures and frameworks, which are mostly mostly China-led, or also led by the joint Sino-Russian friendship, strategic partnership, and in which a number of non-Western states, important non-Western states, rising powers, are members. So SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, was among the first ones that started emerging initially in 1996. It was a 5-member grouping of 3 Central Asian states and Russia and China at the initiative of both Russia and China for purpose of border demarcation, because the borders had not been properly demarcated. And the second purpose was for China. The key aim was, as the Chinese say, to combat the 3 evils of separatism, extremism, and religious fundamentalism. Now, how China describes these, I mean, that's a very contentious definition, but anyway, those were the aims, and all the Central Asian states, and subsequently, a few years later, Uzbekistan also joined, though Uzbekistan doesn't have a border with China. So initially, it was states bordering China that were the members, then Uzbekistan also joined, and all of them had pledged support to border cooperation. After a few years, we find that the organization continues to evolve, and it acquires greater scope, and it defines itself as, broadly speaking, a cooperation organization, from border cooperation to economic, educational, everything, and also strategic cooperation, anti-terrorism, and so forth. So many Western scholars already started speculating at that time whether this was going to emerge gradually as some kind of Eastern NATO or some kind of China-Russia-led security organization. Though in formal terms, Russia, China, and its members say that it's not a military organization, but they cooperate on security matters, on anti-terrorism, drug trafficking, border checking, border control, illegal border crossing, and so forth. Now what we see is that since 2017, it started expanding with India and India and Pakistan becoming members of SCO. And India's membership was very, very much facilitated by Russia's insistence. We can speculate a great deal about what were the calculations behind this, and there is a great deal of speculation also that China wasn't really that keen on having India, but that doesn't mean that China did not want India. So what we see now is that there is cooperation among these states on a multilateral platform on specific number of issues, but at the same time there are competition at bilateral level. So India and Pakistan joined because it was agreed that if India joins, then Pakistan must also be admitted simultaneously. And based on the chronology of applications, Pakistan should have been admitted earlier and India a year later, but an exception was made to convey that both states are equal, so they have been admitted. So now the SCO transforms itself from a Central Asia or Eurasia-centered organization to an inter-regional organization, which encompasses the Central Asian states, Russia, China, as well as South Asian states, India and Pakistan. And just last year, well, this year actually, India holds the rotating presidency, the chairmanship of the SCO. So India held a virtual summit of SCO. There are a lot of debates about that also, because very last minute India decided to have a virtual summit rather than a face-to-face one, because a face-to-face one would have required Xi Jinping and Putin and of course other member states to come to Delhi. So for reasons that you know very well, Putin is not traveling to any, he's very selective about where he travels because he could get arrested. So he's not going to the BRICS summit in South Africa. He's sending Lavrov. And for a variety of reasons, Xi Jinping, India was probably quite circumspect about inviting Xi Jinping. So anyway, I can answer those things if you have more questions. But India had this, in this virtual summit that was held, Iran has been admitted to the SCO. So now we see SCO becoming even more of an inter-regional organization with members from Central Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East. There is also, Belarus is also going to join next year, and there are a number of other Middle Eastern states which are interested in the membership. So the few questions and observations that I would leave you with, and you can ask further questions, is that the SCO, as it continues to expand, we find that there are conflicting agenda and also conflicting interests. And these are kind of underneath the surface, because on the kind of broad level, India, China, Russia, everyone is talking about friendship, solidarity, agreement. But China has, SCO is certainly a China-created organization. So it is an example of a China attempt to establish a China-led international order. So, we have a number of international, we can say that there are a number of orders emerging in contemporary world. So it's a multi-order world. There is the Western liberal order, which is being challenged by China through the SCO, through the Belt and Road Initiative, and China's bilateral partnerships with countries way beyond its borders in Africa, in Latin America, and certainly in Europe, South Asia, Southeast Asia. There is attempt on part of Russia to also have, I would not say Russia-led order, because there isn't any order. In fact, there's no order in Russia as such. So when we talk about some sort of international order, the best Russia under current circumstances can achieve is through partnership with countries such as China and a limited, maybe partnership, bilateral partnership with India, and also cultivating partnership with certain African states, countries such as Iran. So if you ask about who are the key strategic partners of Russia at the moment, it's China, India, Iran, and what's the fourth one? I'm just trying to, it kind of escapes. I think India, China, Iran, Turkey, yes, Turkey to a certain extent. So there isn't much of a Russia-led order, but when we look at Central Asian states, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, certainly relationship with Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, there's very much an attempt by Russia to consolidate a Russia-led order through the Eurasian Economic Union, and of course there is the Collective Security Treaty Organization. About India as an emerging power, India, I mean, there's a lot of rhetoric about this in India. India's role as a world leader, Vishwa Guru is the word that's used, but India is not yet in a position to establish an India-led world order. So we have a Western-led world order, and there's a China-led world order with India, Russia, and other countries, which are members of all, I mean, not Russia, but India certainly is member of the Western-led order and organizations, and also member of the China-led order, and very selectively, strategically forming partnership. So if the question arises, what role does the SCO play in the regional security arrangement? We find, my observation is that SCO plays a largely symbolic role, but symbolism has a great deal of relevance in the modern world, because it sends signals to the Western world about this kind of solidarity between the various countries. And with the exception of India, all other member states of SCO are non-democratic states. As a person of Indian background who also studies Indian politics, I would say that the democratic institutions in India at the moment are also are not functioning well under the current leadership of Prime Minister Modi and the BJP. So there are many, many ethnic, religious, and other problems. There are many flaws in India's democratic system. So yes, SCO has a symbolic value. And finally, to conclude, what we are likely to see as SCO continues to expand, and as many analysts keep asking whether SCO is likely to acquire some military security functions, and this also depends on to what extent China and Russia further develop their partnership, and whether China in the near future supplies some kind of military aid to Russia. Now, these are very debatable, very complicated issues, and China is certainly very, very cautious, because China also wants to improve its relationship with the West, with the US, and China wants to become #1 power. So China is playing a very strategic role. It doesn't want to completely alienate the West. So Russia is useful to China to the extent that China can maintain that solidarity and resist Western influence. But unlike Russia, which is very anti-Western at the moment, China is pursuing a much more open policy of being recognized as an equal partner in Western-dominated or liberal international system. So finally, what we see is that there are differences between ultimately what China wants and what Russia wants. There are profound different asymmetries emerging between Russia and China. Russia is much more defiant of the Western and current international order. China wants to be an equal partner. And India is kind of hedging somewhere in between. So India is also very closely allied with the US and with the West. And when it comes to the Indian Ocean and other areas, India is seeking close partnership with the US, with Australia, also with Japan to limit China's role. And at the same time, within the SCO, India is kind of bandwagoning, so to say, with countries propagating anti-Western agenda. So India has been giving different signals, and this policy of India is defined by its foreign minister as policy of strategic multi-alignment. So all these policies have a short-term effectiveness, but eventually we find that there are many, many differences which are likely to emerge among the various non-Western groupings and states. And so finally, none of these institutions, as I say, are really capable of playing any effective role in establishing security in the region. Maybe I've talked way more than what I probably was going to, so I will stop with this and take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Davé. So we'll now move on to the Q&A session. So please, dear colleagues, raise your hand or put your questions in the chat.
If anyone wants to ask in Russian, I'm happy with it. I'm fluent in Russian, so don't hesitate. Unfortunately, I don't speak Ukrainian.
I guess from present colleagues, there is no question, but we have received some questions from colleagues who are not present today, but they're still interested. So the questions from a professor of University of Taras Shevchenko, which is based in Kiev. So how does the ACO contribute to the stability and security of the Eurasian region, in your opinion? If it actually did contribute in some way, or it was more like creating an organization who's just having a symbolic part in Shanghai's strategic plan.
Okay, is there any other question which is similar? So maybe I can kind of combine my answer.
No, I guess it's like one and a kind. Okay.
Yeah, so when I say it plays a symbolic role, I don't mean symbolic in the sense that it's not substantive and it's just meaningless. When I'm using the word symbolic, I mean, in international politics, in today's world, when we see symbols do matter because they mobilize people and they kind of also they kind of lead to formation of certain agenda and giving signals to each other, to friends and to enemies and to rivals. So symbols are important. SU has achieved a certain degree of success, I would say. And I don't, it's success in the sense that initial aim of China was to contain the independence and the autonomy demands in Xinjiang region. So China has managed through variety of policies and subsequently through SCO, China has managed to suppress these demands and regulate the movement of people from Xinjiang to Central Asia. So it was very much afraid of cross-border terrorism, as it says. So it has managed to contain that with the cooperation of Central Asian states. Secondly, the RATS, R-A-T-S, it's a strange name, the Regional Anti-Terror Structure, has had some success. It was set up some 15 years ago. So again, kind of combating cross-border terrorism, whatever they say. And India and Pakistan especially are quite attracted to this agenda. But these are, state conceptions of security. They do not really address issues that when citizens and people feel threatened by their own states and by police and military and surveillance structures of their own states, who's going to protect them? So of course, the conception of security within these structures is very much state-centric, doesn't take into account human security and democratic rights and freedoms and human rights and so forth. Finally, SCO has had a limited effectiveness, yes, in border security, and especially the various efforts that China has made to build border checkpoints between Afghanistan and Tajikistan. So also the area that intersects with China, very close to China. And so in terms of regional security, yes, it has had an effect, but this is also a matter that concerns India very much because Pakistan is a close ally of China. And that if you look at the map, there is that the point where Chinese, Afghan, Tajik, Pakistani, and Indian borders intersect near Kashmir. So India is very much concerned. So there are all these differences within SCO as well. So it kind of allows, what it does is that it allows countries such as China and India to engage with each other. It allows India and Pakistan in a limited way to engage with each other. And it also allows maybe Tajikistan countries, weaker countries such as Tajikistan, to also somehow feel get support of Russia or China in terms of also securitizing, strengthening their borders with Afghanistan. So it has those functions, but otherwise, I think it's not really a security providing organization.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I guess you have already give some answers, but there's still a question, so probably you will give some more insights. What do you see as the main benefit to countries to actually join the SCO, and what are the potential drawbacks of that decision?
Yes, I mean, right now the debate is whether continued expansion of the SCO will also lead to a greater disagreement, fragmentation within it, in which Russia, India, China, three major states, are likely to pursue their own specific agendas. So if India and Russia cooperate, or if India and China cooperate, or if Russia and China cooperate, they're cooperating to achieve their own specific objectives. And so the question is, then other Central Asian countries, particularly the smaller countries, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, feel that they have completely been overshadowed by large countries. Middle powers such as Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan also have to be treading very carefully. So there have been also a lot of reservations. I mean, India and Uzbekistan are friends, and there is a lot of rhetoric of friendship. But underneath that, the Uzbek government and analysts have expressed reservations about India, Pakistan, almost hijacking the agenda of the SCO and turning Uzbek countries such as Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan into much weaker countries. So, and now with Iran joining SCO has introduced even more concerns because Iran has an explicit anti-Western agenda. So the fear on part of countries such as Kazakhstan especially, and also Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan is, and these three countries are, at least the leadership of Kazakhstan and now also the leadership of Uzbekistan, is taking a very balanced stance. Kazakhstan talks about multi-vectoralism and wants to expand its partnership with Western countries, and its leadership has taken up, as balanced a stance it could. on the issue of Ukraine to the extent of not supporting, not kind of voting together with Russia, or, sometimes, mostly abstaining in the UN on the resolutions. So it is a matter of concern for countries such as Kazakhstan and also for Uzbekistan and for Kyrgyzstan if SCO acquires a very decisive anti-Western profile with the membership of Iran and also with Russia's role. And Russia and Iran have very close partnership. So that leaves India sort of somewhere in the other camp, because India is strategically using anti-Western rhetoric, but at the same time, India's military cooperation, technical cooperation with the US continues to increase. And if India could get more sophisticated weapons and technology from the US, then India can progressively reduce its dependence on Russian arm. So India is currently like positioning itself on two different stools, and maintaining a precarious balance.
I see. Thank you, Professor Davé. So I guess we have covered all the questions. I appreciate you taking the time to speak at our event, even though you're currently on vacation. Thank you very much, really. And now we'll move to our third speaker, who is Danial Saari. He's Professor of Practice, Director of Political Studies Center, Program Leader of International Relations and Economy, Specialty of the School of Politics and Law at Almaty Management University. And he's also a Program Director at Enactus, Kazakhstan. And he will speak with a topic which is covering Kazakhstan-Chinese economic relations in the frameworks of the One Belt, One Road program. So yeah, please, the floor is yours. Mr. Saari, we can see a presentation, but we cannot hear you.
I'm sorry, I didn't switch on the microphone.
Yeah.
Thank you for the floor, and I will speak about Kazakh-Chinese trade and economic relationships, and about some perspectives for Ukraine. Speaking about international relations and about bilateral relationships between China and Kazakhstan, I have to say that those relationships have started since 1992, just right after the independence gained and disintegration of USSR. And relationships between these two countries are peaceful and quite successful. As my colleague has mentioned, that Kazakhstan pursues the multi-vector foreign policy. That means that we are trying to be somehow impartial, and in the way not to be somehow linked to one of the big power centers. Since you know that we are located between Russia and China, and that is why we try to keep our independence in foreign political and foreign economic relationships as much as possible. So, and I have to say that those relationships are pretty much important for both sides, for China and for Kazakhstan. And if you see, the trade turnover between China and Kazakhstan, you can see that it's quite significant. And China is one of the main partners in foreign trade. So the trade turnover between two countries for the last years amounted more than 23 billion US dollars. And China exports electronics, machinery, equipments, textiles. If you even see almost everywhere. We may call as a kind of a museum of Chinese production. Well, since we have the neighbors and we have quite close trade relationships, and Kazakhstan exports oil, gas, coal, so hydrocarbons, and also materials, so raw materials. Speaking about One Belt and One Road initiative, yes, which was launched by Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2013, it's quite a good opportunity for our country to join to this project, which will cover, more than 100 countries in almost all continents. And this initiative is good for Kazakhstan in a sense of having opportunity, well, to use and to take advantage from the transit. So Kazakhstan can be used as a corridor, as a transport corridor, and that can include lots of different routes. As part of this program, our country tries to attract more investments, well, in order to somehow improve its infrastructure, the construction and the transport infrastructure, especially also in energy sector, lots of different fields of economy. There are quite many companies, Chinese companies, well, that are deployed in Kazakhstan, and they include railroad, highways, energy facilities. So in lots of different fields, you may see the presence of Chinese companies in Kazakhstan. The economic relationships between our countries within this program they somehow strengthen our relationships, and both somehow promote trade and investments. And there are some, I think, well, hesitations, and some experts, well, speak about the economic dependence that might lead to some political dependence. And I might remember, the words of the former president of Uzbekistan, who was trying to announce that those countries that take economic support from China and get debts, they might be much dependent on. But in fact, the debts of Kazakhstan is not that much. It's not more than $9 billion US dollars. Speaking about the opportunities, the opportunities for Ukraine, I have to say that Ukraine can take an advantage, yes, for the transportation of goods from China to Europe, and of course there are some risks for China due to the fact of the conflict, yes, of the war, and also the infrastructure, the way the roads are shaped, so that also much worsens, yes, this kind of opportunity to be linked. But nowadays, in these new realities, we may see that the opportunities for Ukraine to join this project are increasing, I would say, a lot. This One Belt and One Road program and the Silk Road rail transport route that Kazakhstan might provide very good alternative, yes, to traditional maritime route. Since you know that our country doesn't have an access to sea, and that is why we are pretty much dependent on the railroads or the air, yes, routes. So this route can be also beneficial for Ukraine, yes, especially for its export-oriented industries. The development of the cooperation might somehow strengthen relationships between Ukraine and China, and so Ukraine may use this in order to increase the export of its goods to China and other Southeast Asian countries. So, and also to import its goods, well, to either to Central Asian states or the Southeast Asian nations. Is there a place for Ukraine in this Silk Road? So theoretically, yes, we may count on a kind of a fraction of more than 260 million tons that we can make a volume of trade between China and the European Union, from which Ukraine may take an advantage. Yes, but there are of course some obstacles for Ukraine to enter this project. First, Ukraine is not still the member of European Union like Bulgaria and Romania, and of course, for it's much cheaper for China, well, to go through both Bulgaria and Romania, where the roads are better shaped. So for Ukraine, that it has kind of a lengthy mechanism of customs clearance, and that might also depend on the customs and discounts. For in comparison with Bulgaria and Romania, we may see that of course it's much cheaper, well, to transport it through Bulgaria and Romania. Yes, but still, that there are opportunities. Yes. If I, ask a question, yes, whether the war destroys this project. Of course, security issue is quite important, but even though that there are still opportunities for Ukraine, yes, to join this project, and about 3% of goods, yes, transported, through the Ukrainian, section, and the volume of cargo from China, and there was a quite, I would say, a prominent, yes, case. So the routes, that was used, to transport the goods through Kazakhstan, Russia, and Belarus to Milosevic, and that was kind of a terminal, yes, and the Chinese had higher hopes, into the fact that the northern corridor through Belarus has somehow exhausted its capacity. And also since 2020, the trains have also been running on the territory of Ukraine to Slavkov terminal in Poland, and that was quite popular, yes. And they were increasing the trains, and so from 2020, from 40 to 2021 to 400 ones. Since the war started, the European Union imposed sanctions against Russia and also, Belarus, since the Belarus was linked, into the process of invasion of Ukraine. So the part of the Russian troops entered Ukraine from the territory of Belarus, and so that's why this route is not really, I would say, attractive and possible. So the transport corridor through territory of Ukraine. For Ukraine, this project, One Belt and One Road, is quite interesting in the way of creating, well, transport corridor, which may somehow be possible in order to bypass the territory of Russia, and that is quite a good opportunity in order to deliver the goods through this kind of corridor. Yes, in order to get the delivery of goods, through this transit opportunity. And that would also make some investments, well, into logistics of Ukraine in order to have better conditions. So this kind of cooperation between the countries is going to be quite advantageous, I may say, for Ukraine. And also it will allow developing, its own logistic infrastructure, while building new elevators, logistic hubs, the warehouses. In addition, this might also provide the development of river logistics, the cleaning and the dredging of River Dnieper, and the construction of river grain and universal cargo terminals. So China is #1 for Ukraine in imports of its agricultural products, and so 80% of all Ukrainian agricultural goods to China is sunflower oil and feed corn. Are there any risks, for Ukraine's participation in the Great Silk Road? So, based on the map of on the current map of the One Belt and One Road map version, this kind of the contemporary one, we may see that it's somehow Ukraine is not well presented there. Yes, so the freight traffic from China to Europe by rail doesn't pass via Ukrainian territories. It occupies insignificant place in the air transportation route. Yes, so since 2016, the Chernomorsk to China test flight was launched, and that was successful. So China received its goods alternative. But the thing is that in the opposite direction, it was quite complicated to send back the goods. So the Trans-Caspian corridor running via Ukrainian territory requires fewer border crossings than the route via Central Asia. Ukraine needs to present this alternative to Chinese partners by developing somehow a holistic and comprehensive projects in which China would be somehow interested. So Beijing somehow announced to consider Ukraine as a potential participant in this project, and it would be subject to economic and also to feasibility and to security reasons as well. So the transit corridor to China bypassing Russia via Ukraine. So the corridor Silk Road to China bypassing Russia through the territory of Ukraine will be functioning. So it was proposed that it would be functioning even since 2018. And nowadays it has even more reasons. The Silk Road is not only the transportation of goods to China from the EU countries, through Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, but also to Iran and the countries of the Persian Gulf. Kiev and Tbilisi were the initiators of the construction of the route bypassing Russia, and the first such experimental container train set off on the route Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and China in 2016, but without success. That was no cargo on the way back, and I hope that the situation might change dramatically, yes, for the good of Ukraine. So that's it. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Saari. So I guess our participants can just raise their hands or put a question in a chat. So we received one question from Maria Parhomenko, and she asked you about how Ukraine's democratic values can be a challenge for this cooperation with China.
How democratic values of
Ukraine.
I do think that it's not gonna be a problem. Well, could you just maybe somehow clarify what do you mean? How might the democratic values might affect on trade? So could you maybe somehow clarify?
Hi, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, please, Ms. Parhomenko.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Saari. Your presentation was very interesting. Yeah, I just wanted to say that China mostly cooperates with countries that are not so democratic, in my opinion. But Ukraine, like, stands.
I see. Yes, I got it. I got it now. But I would mention that China is much more concerned about the economic profit rather than so much political, cultural, or even the democratic based concepts. Even if you take the history, for example, since the presence, since even the time of Soviet Union and Chinese relationships. So China has changed its direction, and even since the time of Mao Zedong, and then since Deng Xiaoping, they have changed since 1978 their direction. They moved to market relationships. They have dramatically changed their economic concept, which is pretty much different from the one in Russia. So Russia is pretty much preoccupied on its political presence, on its kind of so-called hegemonic, I would say paradigm. But China is more concerned about its economic growth, and that is why I wouldn't say that any issues related to democracy or liberty or any values related to this Western-like values might deteriorate relationships between Ukraine and China. The thing is that the projects should be pretty much feasible and profitable for China, and that's why I think that China. I can be, of course, be mistaken, but I do believe that China is pretty much more preoccupied about its economic profitability.
Thank you, Mr. Saari. So I guess that Mr. Kuprienko, can also ask a question, please.
Thank you for this presentation. And my question, how does China perceive and react to the role of Ukraine in the framework of Chinese initiative, One Belt, One Road? And are there prospects for deepening cooperation between the two countries after Ukraine's adhesion to the European Union and NATO?
Yes, even taking in the fact that Ukraine is not a member of the European Union, still China considers its participation and so its place in the project. But if Ukraine joins the European Union, of course, it increases its chances much more, because it's going to be much cheaper for Ukraine to transport its goods via the territory of Ukraine. So I think it might increase its opportunities within the project dramatically.
Thank you so much.
Well, I guess Now I will ask you a question from the one colleague, which I have received earlier. Can you talk about the challenges that Kazakhstan faces in terms of integrating into the larger One Belt, One Road program, and how the country working to overcome those challenges? Is a question from Ms. Melnik, University of Taras Shevchenko, Ukraine.
Okay, thank you for such an interesting question. I do not think that there are pretty much or a lot of challenges for Kazakhstan in this way of joining to the project, since we see more opportunities rather than the threats. And also it somehow correlates to the Kazakhstan concept Nurli Zhol. It's also related to the improvement of the country's infrastructural projects, and that is why it somehow coincides pretty much. And Kazakhstan, of course, wants to enjoy from the participation in this project a lot. Of course, there are, if you maybe somehow trace, the mass media or social media, well, you may see that, of course, there are some xenophobic, perceptions among the people. But speaking about the state position, we do have quite positive, perception, and we see, of course, more opportunities rather than threats.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Saari. I guess we have covered all the questions, and thank you for this thorough presentation. It was great indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, now we'll move on to our next speaker, Li Yan, an assistant researcher at the Department for European Central Asian Studies of the China Institute of International Studies, which is based in China. And the topic he'll talk about is missing of Chinese diplomacy in the new era and the prospects of cooperation between China and Ukraine. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for giving me the floor.
Thank
Can
you.
you hear me?
Yes, Lian, we can
Okay.
hear you.
And thank the Ukrainian Diplomacy Public Foundation for the invitation. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to attend the roundtable and give a speech. My name is Li Yan, Assistant Research Fellow at China Institute of International Studies. Today, I'd like to share with you some of my views on China's diplomacy in the new era and the prospects for cooperation between China and Ukraine. First of all, I'd like to introduce the purpose, principles, and the characteristics of China's diplomacy in the new era. To realize the great rejuvenation of Chinese nation is the historical mission of China's diplomacy. Like other countries, safeguarding the fundamental interests of the country, that is sovereignty, security, and the development interest is a fundamental task of the China foreign work. Its purpose is to maintain world peace and promote common development. Under this framework, to maintain world peace, promoting the building of a community with a shared future for mankind is the main line and overall goal of China's diplomacy. And the Belt and Road is an important platform for cooperation. The Chinese people who suffered the pain of wars in the 19th and 20th centuries bear in mind two principles. One is to lag behind is to be beaten, and the other is do not do unto others what you would not have others do unto you. Therefore, adhering the path of peaceful development is a basic principle of China's diplomacy, provided that the national interests are not sacrificed, rejecting the old logic that a strong country must seek hegemony. China is committed to breaking the Thucydides trap by building a new mode of major country relations and use the wisdom of Chinese civilization. The China nation strongly believes that harmony is most precious. The world is such a big place. By establishing an equal, open, and cooperative global partnership and expanding converging interests with other countries, countries will eventually live in peace and share a common future. I have extracted a few key words from the Chinese foreign minister. His year-end work summary, which can help understand the layout and underlying logic of China's diplomacy. There are hand of states diplomacy, great power diplomacy. First, this is mean the United States, Russia, Europe. Next is neighboring diplomacy or surrounding diplomacy. Here is ASEAN, Central Asia, Japan, and the other keywords are development countries, global governance, co-national interests, and the diplomacy for the people. In the recent year, there have been some new trends and achievements in China's diplomacy. That is, China is actively exploring ways to solve hotspot issues with the Chinese characteristics. The first example is the joint statement issued by China, Saudi Arabia, and Iran in Beijing on March this year, in which the two countries decide to restore diplomatic relations and activate important bilateral agreements that had been put on hold. This is a highlight moment for China's diplomacy, which will inject new stability into the situation in the Middle East and lead to an expanded trend of easing and normalization of relations within the region. The release of China's post-power on Ukraine crisis in February was also an attempt. Another proof is China's growing circle of friends. On March 26 this year, Honduras take a historic step by becoming the 182nd country to establish diplomatic relations with China. The day before, the Honduran Foreign Ministry officially announced that it had severed diplomatic relations with Taiwan. So there are 13 countries that have not established diplomatic relations with China. The new pattern of 182 versus 13 respects a higher level of China's diplomatic. Finally, I would like to talk about the prospect of the China-Ukraine cooperation. Also, as you know, the war has had a certain negative impact on the economic and trade cooperation between our two countries, especially in the areas of investments and transportation. Now the two countries have actively explored the prospects of Ukrainian agriculture products into the Chinese market, such as honey, flour, poultry meat, and animal feed, and so on. And the commercial and the economic departments of the two countries intend to prepare to send a protocol on the exports of Ukrainian goods by the end of this year. China and Ukraine have a sound, very good basis for the cooperation in infrastructure construction, and I think China will play a constructive role in Ukraine's post-war reconstruction. So we also hope that the war will end at an early date and the people-to-people exchange will return to normal at a early days. So that's all I'm going to share with you today. I'm so sorry that I don't have enough time to discuss with you today because I have other arrangements. As last, I wish the round table exercise. Thank you everyone for your time. Goodbye and до свидания.
Thank you, Lian. Would you like to receive some questions? Well, I guess Lian is kind of tight on time. Would you like to receive some questions from our fellows, Lian?
Sorry, now it's time for me to offline.
All right. Then we'll move to our next speaker. If you have some questions to Lian, please kindly send it in chat, and we'll prepare some answers later on, and we'll send it to your email addresses. So as for our next speaker, it's Ihor Litvin, Ukraine-China Business Council co-chairman and former ambassador of Ukraine to China. And he will deliver a speech on the following topic, China's position in the geopolitical arena of the world. So please, Mr. Litvin, the floor is yours.
Yes, hi everybody. It is very interesting for me to participate in this round table, and thank you very much for inviting me here. I was just listening to Ms. Li Yan about the prospects of development of bilateral relations between China and Ukraine. And I would say that it is quite an urgent, quite an issue within the context of this war which Russia is waging against Ukraine. But my topic is not that. Anyway, I will return to that issue of the war, which is being called in China, I don't know why, as the Ukrainian conflict or Ukrainian crisis. And I do know much about the history, and I do remember one very dark page in the history of China, which is called the 19 Massacre, when within several weeks it was 300,000 Chinese people killed by Japanese invaders. And I just think if I can imagine if I use some kind of title for this tragedy as 19 crisis or 19 conflict, I do think that Chinese partners would never understand me. That is why I don't understand some kind of names they give to this not motivated war which Russia is waging against Ukraine. So my topic is the foreign policy, I mean the place of China in the global world. You know, everybody considers everybody in the international arena judging from its own reasons, and I would like to draw your attention to how China is considering its role in the global world, including diplomacy, foreign policy, etc. If we take Wikipedia, then we will see that China maintains all countries, big or small, should be treated according to their consideration equally and respect each other. All affairs should be consulted and resolved by all countries on the basis of equal participation. No country should bully others on the basis of strength. Another provision is from the website of the Foreign Policy Ministry of China. China will continue to follow an independent foreign policy of peace, keep to the path of peaceful development, and pursue equality and mutually beneficial cooperation with all countries. We, China, have never been subordinate to anyone, that's true, and we have never plundered others. We have to agree with all these considerations, and we have to admit that Chinese foreign policy has several principles on which the role of China in the world is being based. 5 principles of peaceful coexistence of China are mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, and this is actually was included into the 12-point peaceful plan of China regarding the Russian-Ukrainian war. Then integrity, then mutual non-aggression, non-interference in each other's affairs, equality and mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. Of course, peaceful coexistence is something we have to be based on. Actually, China has always pursued an independent foreign policy of peace. It has never taken to initiate, to launch a war against any other country. There was some episodes in the 1967 against Soviet Union in the island of Belansky, but we do not consider this as the war. It was also 1979 some trip of Chinese army to Vietnam. We're not also considering it as the war, but we can agree that China has never taken the initiative to launch a war against any other country, much less to fund attacks by non-state actors against other countries. According to the Chinese tradition, the Chinese diplomacy was always like, we need to be friends with everybody. We are using soft approaches. We better use friendly methods, etc., etc., etc. But now it has changed. Now it is absolutely different type of foreign policy or different type of diplomacy. And what type is it now? China's wolf warrior diplomacy, it can call. It has been certainly positively considered by the internal audience in China. Internationally, wolf warrior diplomacy has offered gathered a strong response, and in some cases has provoked black cash against China and specific diplomats. What do I mean? I mean that if, say, the Chinese former Chinese ambassador to France says that he cannot see any ground to consider post-Soviet countries like Ukraine, like Kazakhstan, like Uzbekistan, like Georgia, Azerbaijan, he cannot see the grounds to consider these states as sovereign states because it was not announced that these are some kind of sovereign states. He cannot even think that by this he could blame Russia for not being sovereign state, etc. Another Chinese representative to the European Union is saying that, listen, we are not going to have any military union with Russia, and our friendship and strategic partnership for forever, it's just a rhetoric. I do think that knowing Chinese diplomats, having so many friends within the diplomatic society of China, I cannot even imagine that that was some kind of thoughts and considerations coming out from their personal opinion. But it's my opinion. Okay, and if we take the role of China in the global world now, we can just consider all this within the context of Russian-Ukrainian war. What do I mean? Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed the geopolitical landscape of Eurasia. The invasion itself reinforced the argument that Russia seeks its security by controlling buffer states. They consider us as buffer state and its periphery. Underestimating this was a fundamental miscalculation by the Western countries. Underestimating the West's resolve to resist territorial aggression together with Ukraine's resilience and determination to defeat the invaders were fundamental miscalculation of Putin. In contrast to Russia, China seeks its security through having blind accommodating states on its borders. It maintains this through its statecraft that involves a mix of soft and sharp power, trade and investment, and its diaspora. If we take the foreign policy direction of China to Africa, we see that this is trade and investment. If we take Latin America, it's same, trade and investment. And here in Eurasia, we consider as the global influence of China to the world. I mean, the Belt and Road Initiative of 2013 by President Xi Jinping. It is the factor that was motivated both by China's quest for security from its dependence on hard-to-defend sea lanes for its energy and raw materials needs, and for expanding its influence in Central Asia and beyond Central Asia. As a heavy shadow falls across Russia, as it seeks to hold even its marginal territorial gains in Ukraine, China is set to dominate Central Asia with little or no resistance from Russia. Dominate Central Asia with little or for Russia, this is the great long-term price for the Ukraine war. Increased dependence on China economically, diplomatically, I do think it's politically, and as a result, waning influence across its former so-called empire. The present war of Russia, and it is just an example of the global role of China in the world. The present war of Russia against Ukraine has been entirely to China's advantage. First, Russia is now a depleted power in Central Asia. Its authority and threat to Central Asian states increasingly hollow. China and the others, such as India, have had access to cheap Russian oil, Russian gas, and US-led Western financial sanctions, have seen greater efforts by non-Western countries to de-dollarize trade and investment transactions. I do think that China considers Russia also as the possible sort of irritating moment, irritating instrument against Western countries, because having Russia as sort of strategic partner, we have in mind that Russia has more than 6,000 nuclear warheads. China has only 400. There are plans to increase this quantity up to 1,500, but they need some more time for this. They will surely get this goal, but later. In this time, they cannot be equal to the United States and Russia in terms of nuclear warheads. And this is very important factor, as China from 1971 is the United Nations member. First, that was the, if you know, the Republic of China, which is called now Taiwan. And China is the UN Security Council constant member. So, significantly, it has dealt itself into the nascent Ukraine-Russia peace process as the only major state that can deal directly with both sides. I can give some development of this. I know personally the Ambassador Li Hui. When I was ambassador of Ukraine to China, he was the Director General of the European and Central Asia Department in Foreign Ministry of China. And we've been discussing a lot of things, a lot of issues, and we've been preparing a lot of actions together, including the state visit of then chairman or president of China, Mr. Danial, to Ukraine. So his mission was good. I mean, that was just a mission to acquire interest of both countries, I mean, the both sides of this war, and also Europe, European Union, the neighboring countries of Ukraine, etc., etc., etc. And I do think that it will be another mission like this, because that was just the first step to demonstrate, first of all, that China is ready to play the role of global interceptor, global player, and we certainly have to have in mind that it took 1 year for China to express its peaceful plan. Exactly on February 24th, 2023, after 1 year after the war started, China announced its 12-point peaceful plan. But there were no even mention in that to reach the peace in this war, the invasion must be stopped. The invaders must quit the territory of Ukraine. Without this, it's something that we can consider this 12-point peace plan as just let us be all friends. War is bad, peace is good, etc., etc., etc. You understand? And we have to stress that in this context, I do remember the famous author of the book The Art of War, Mr. Sun Tzu, who said that the best way to defeat an enemy is through strategy and diplomacy. I mean, the use of soldiers is at least desirable. And considering now the diplomacy of China, which is demonstrating the global role of China, we could say that Mr. Sun Tzu would applaud Mr. Xi Jinping for his efforts as the person who provide strategy and diplomacy. And there's genius prospects for China to become a peacemaker. And let's see if it will be in such a way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Litvin. I guess we'll now receive some questions from the colleagues who are present. If there is none, I will draw your attention to the questions we have received before the Zoom session.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
I guess we'll move to them. So we have received a question from Danial Wittmann. He is a foreign policy researcher institute representative, and he's a former foreign service officer with United States Information Agency and Department of State. So he drew attention to the problem, which is well, historically in some way, but well, I will quote it. The Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiated by Secretary Clinton was later abandoned by her during her candidacy for president of the United States, and China almost immediately moved in to create the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And what he is asking is, how is Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank doing in raising living standards in Asian countries and specifically in China?
Yeah, I got the question. I do think that it is not actually what I'm expert in, but I do think that the economic expansion of China in the world, which is being grounded on good financing, good strategy for production and logistic ways and directions, plus involvement of big Western corporations and banks, and creating also some kind of financial instrument to implement the new Silk Road, the Belt and Road Initiative. This is something which we can consider as kind of really instruments to help a lot of countries, including China, to become more modernized. And if you listen to the words of President Xi Jinping on the 20th Congress of Communist Party of China, and later, if you see the initiatives of President Xi Jinping of global character, like global economy, global civilization, global security, and the mankind of the united destiny, that means China has the power to demonstrate all over the world that, see, we are already got some, reached some goals. We don't have poverty in our country. We have the middle class. See our people very happy, and we can be your partners in reaching the same goals to everybody in the world. I would like to say this. as the answer to the question, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I see that Mr. Moisenko is also raising his hand, so please.
Yeah, thank you. Dear Ambassador, could you please clarify what beyond the agricultural sector, what other spheres or industries could Ukraine potentially propose for cooperation with China, considering our respective strengths and areas of expertise? Thank you.
Thank you. So we do understand that the main thing which can attract China in terms of trade and economic cooperation with Ukraine, it's agricultural products. First of all, grain, then sunflower oil, then frozen meal, then milk and products, etc., etc., etc. Then it is also the metals, I mean the iron ore and some other things. It's also the high-tech, I mean the technological something which they can take from Ukraine concerning spheres like aviation, space, etc., etc., etc. IT, because we do have very talented guys which are at least number 2 in the world, maybe within the first 3 main players. This is Ukrainian IT guys. And also the sphere of science and technology I did mention. Then humanitarian. I mean, first of all, the education. I just came several weeks ago, came from China. And the main goal of my visit to China was negotiations and approval of joint documents regarding the creation of a new higher education institution in China for training the experts in the field of aviation for China. The partner of Chinese certain institution is Kiev-based National Aviation University. And this is only just a small example of what do they need. So they need our talents, they need our technology. They already asked me to inquire if they can cooperate with the state enterprise Antonov in terms of building very famous Ukrainian aircrafts in the territory of China, etc., etc., etc. So these areas are not very much limited, and I do think that we will have very soon, after the war is over, we will soon head back to the ranges of our bilateral turnover to at least 20 billion USD. For example, we understand that Ukraine for Chinese foreign trade is not very much important in terms of just figures, because the early yearly turnover in foreign trade for China is 6,500 billion USD. The share of United States is say 755 billion USD in trade with China. China EU trade is 835 billion USD. Russia's trade, it was actually 140 billion. Last year it increased up to 690 billion USD, but anyway, it is less than 2%. So the prospects are quite good, but we need to end our war, I mean, to reach our victory as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. We have received several more questions. So you just answered a quite similar one to the question I was about to ask you, so I will move forward to the next one. It's from a student from Kazakhstan University, and she is asking you, giving the credit to your experience in studying China, please provide us with some studies or books that would reveal the essence of China as a state and forging economic power. Yeah.
Didn't get your question in full. Should I provide what?
She's asking about some studies or books, maybe some research, which could reveal the essence of China as a state and like top economic power. I guess you can write it in a chat or something like that.
First of all, what should I advise? If you know, we do have the Association of Sinologies of Ukraine. They edit, I don't remember, not monthly, a quarterly edition of a journal which is called China, Ukraine, China. There, a lot of materials, a lot of information regarding absolutely all spheres and all matters with regard to the bilateral relations between China and Ukraine, prospects, and issues which are being considered by the practical guys. I mean, to the 30th anniversary of the date of establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Ukraine, which was in 2022. This Association of Sinologists, they published this edition where there were interviews with several Ukraine's ambassadors to China, mine also there, plus analytical articles and even reference to the books on these all issues and related to the bilateral relations between Ukraine and China. Especially, there are many of them touching the economic issues, and you can just start take this as the main source, and I do know that a lot of references to some needed required materials you can find over there. Thank you.
Thank you, President. And I guess Ms. Moskalenko is having her hands raised, so please, Ms. Moskalenko, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your speech. And my question will be touching upon the topic of soft power. So you mentioned that China is using soft power quite extensively. And the question is, I think it's we can be rather certain in saying that China has cut down on exporting its communist values due to maybe the low popularity of consuming this sort of values around the world. Seems like economic benefits that China brings to other countries in the world is the only aspect which is which China can use for promoting itself as a soft power. So my question is, will it actually suffice? Will it be actually enough to get the world around China if that's what is the final aim of Chinese foreign policy is? Thank you.
What is the final aim of China in its aspirations to provide the whole world with its soft power, right?
Well, almost. From your speech, I understood that China uses soft power, and judging from how soft power can be delivered, it can be either cultural values, ideologies, or once again, economy. And economics is something that China does deliver a lot. My question is, will it be enough to pursue all the aims that China actually plans to do?
We have to understand very clearly that as every other state, China pursues its own state interest. The state interest is that we have to provide all conditions to get our people be developed. We have to be modernized. We even apply to the whole society, I mean, the whole humankind to become the society of the United States. We are ready to share our values, I mean, the cultural, traditional, historical, etc., etc., etc. But we have the goal to be the example for all the people in the world how to manage that the country can be developing in a real, time frames, etc., etc. See us, we are the example. The main principle and main goal is to become the really example, to become a leader. We are number 2 in world economy, but we have to be the whole friend for everybody. And you better be friends with us than with somebody else, because we are progressive. We are offering good values. If you follow our advices, if you follow our attempts to get your friendship, to get our offers in the right way, then your country, your people would be happy. I do think this is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Litvin. And I guess the last question, again, pre-asked. So, can you speak about the role of Chinese growing economic and political influence in the world and how it might impact its relations with Ukraine, particularly in terms of Ukraine's own efforts to forge its own path and independent foreign policy?
It is quite an issue, In this case, if China, for example, buy more Ukrainian grain and Ukrainian agriculture and other products, the more they buy, the better for us, for Ukraine. And then we can see the efforts of China to make some kind of influence into Russia that which is related to this grain corridor, because I know for sure, as the co-chairman of Ukrainian-Chinese Business Council, that we do have offers, requests, and requests for grain, other products, and they always ask, how could you deliver these products to China if you don't have a grain corridor? And the answer is, you please tell Russia that this is not which can be considered as something not stupid and not criminal, what they're doing with the grain. By the way, they just eliminated several dozens of thousands of some grain product designed to be transported to China. And we have to admit that during the war, within this year, 17 months or almost 18 months of this war, the turnover from almost 20 billion USD between China and Ukraine decreased up to almost 8 billion, which we had by the end of 2022. If they increase this balance. I mean, if they improve this balance, it would be better for us. They can do it, and they I do think they, at least I hope very much, that they're considering the possibility to change their position towards this war. I do think that we can consider China as the, as I said, as the or one of the main players in the field of peace keeping. I mean, putting this aggression to an end, like this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Litvin. I guess we have covered all the questions. We really appreciate having you there for us, for our fellows and
My
students.
pleasure.
Thank you very much. We're hoping to see you on our next event. So we'll move forward to our session with young researchers. And the first one would be Miss Maria Pahomenko, right? And yeah, I hope she can take the floor right now. Yes, please, Miss Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to participate in the conference today. And also, I'm glad to say that my Ukrainian professor is here today as well, Natalia Liepska. And I'm so grateful to her for everything. And let me share my screen, please. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, everything is fine. Please go on.
Okay, thank you so much. So today I would like to talk about Russia and China's authoritarian perspectives on the world order. And I prepared their general perspectives, like general strategies and the comparison. So what are the key differences between them? So first, I would like to say about the common geopolitical agenda of Russia and China. First of all, it's authoritarianism. As we know, Russia and China are the authoritarian regimes, and they used authoritarian strategies, tools in their countries and also abroad, I would say. The second is geopolitical expansion in terms of politics, economy, culture, history, like the way they try to impose themselves in the world. And the third one is propaganda and censorship, is that especially Russia here actively uses propaganda domestically and internationally to influence other countries. And we can see it in the war as well. Right now, the war between Russia and Ukraine. Then searching for allies in Central Asia, Africa, and the Indo-Pacific region, especially. Of course, it's not only those regions, but I would like to stress these ones particularly. Then opposing the Western alliance and democratic values. As we know that Russia and China think that NATO expands aggressively, actively, so they also want their dominance in the world. They want to show that they can influence, they can have an impact, they want to expand, and so on. And I would like to stress here that Russia and China are not great allies in terms of that their relations are weakening, as that China sees that Russia is becoming more isolated in the world. So China in this way like doesn't support Russia openly, but it rather wants to take advantage and have some resources from Russia. The second slide presents Russia's perspective and the main aspects of this perspective. First of all, Russia wants to dominate the post-Soviet space, especially Ukraine. It's one of the reasons why Russia invaded Ukraine last year. Putin said like a few times that collapse of the USSR was a tragedy. And people in Russia have nostalgia. They compare the past and present, and they think that life in the Soviet Union was better. So Russia still believes that it should be dominant in the post-Soviet space. The second one, concept of the Russian world. Russian world means that Russia wants to spread its history, culture, politics abroad, and it wants to protect Russian-speaking people abroad, especially in Ukraine. It was one of the reasons why Russia started the war in 2014 in Ukraine, in the East Ukraine, and this concept of separatism, which is actually irredentism, because actually Russia created artificial strategies and tools to influence people in the Eastern Ukraine. And they said that, okay, like people in the Eastern Ukraine want to join Russia, but in fact it was fake, it was artificial tool. Then the Soviet and imperialist ideological elements that are still present in the Russian politics. For example, I want to provide one case that I'm from Melitopol, which is in the southeast of Ukraine, and Melitopol has been occupied since 2022. And I would like to pay your attention to the second picture on my slide, the Soviet flag in Melitopol, that is still there. And when Russia invaded Melitopol, they restored Lenin's monument. Also, they put Saari's, like Russian imperial slogans everywhere. They put the Soviet symbols and slogans everywhere. It means that Russia still lives in the past. It wants to use the Soviet and imperialist elements in their geopolitics and like domestic politics as well. The fourth one is isolationism. And Russia is not afraid of being isolated from the world. They are confident that they can oppose the West. So they think they can rely on China and rely on North Korea, for example, Central Asia. Also, I would like to point out some fascist elements in the Russian geopolitics. And here I provided some examples like nationalism, Russian supremacy, because Russians truly believe that they are better than other nations, especially in the post-Soviet countries. Historically, they have been humiliated Ukrainians in their politics and in culture as well, mass media, movies, music. They believe that Russians are much better. Second is militarism, is that the cult of war, and I would say they romanticize the war. They create those parades, they make movies about the war, and here we can see the picture of a child in the World War II uniform and the Soviet flag. It means that children there really wear military uniforms on May 9, Victory Day, and children also create military artwork there, because my brother right now studies in the Russian school in the occupied Ukrainian territory, and they are forced to study Russian history from the Russian perspective, and children are involved in those military topics as well. Also, external enemies, us and them believe. It means that Russia always searches for external enemies like the US, NATO, Ukraine, Europe, and they separated themselves. They have this belief that us and them, we are good and they are bad. Next is human rights abuse and controlled mass media. We know that there is no freedom of speech in Russia. There is no democracy, no human rights, and people are oppressed there. So you cannot say anything about the war. You cannot even use the word war there. Next, I would like to say about China's perspective. And first of all, its regional dominance. Of course, China has big ambitions as well, but it selects specific countries, specific targets, like, for example, Africa, Central Asia, and it focuses on them specifically. Then its rapid economic expansion is that China focuses on economic growth a lot, and it searches for what is beneficial for itself. So it targets specific countries that can provide something beneficial for China. Also, it creates different projects, initiatives, actively invests in certain countries like Central Asia, Africa, and so on. Also, China tries to take advantage from different political actors. The third one is balancing and vagueness, being neutral. As we know, China didn't say whether it supports Ukraine or it supports Russia, so it stays neutral, but also it's like supports Russia somehow in some ways, but also it doesn't express its position openly. So historically and culturally, China has this feature that its messages are not clear, actually. Also, China tries to avoid an armed conflict because China doesn't want to risk its economic development and national security. To China, it's very important, so it tries to balance between different political actors. Also, China uses Russia as a resource because Russia still can provide something, probably like energy resources, maybe some technological resources as well. So it's quite beneficial for China. And as we see, China is open to negotiations. Xi Jinping meets with Joe Biden, like with African leaders, with Russian leader. So it tries to balance. And here I would like to point out some key differences between Russian and Chinese geopolitical strategies. First of all, Russia uses hard power more, its domination of hard power, like invasion, violence, abuse, and like controlling foreign territories in Ukraine. For China, it's like more combination of hard and soft power. We cannot say that China focuses on hard power only. It also uses some soft tactics, especially economic soft tactics like investment, trade, economic cooperation, some projects, initiatives. The second one is Russia uses direct aggressive messages when it talks about NATO, talks about other countries. I would say that even their mass media doesn't hesitate talking about invading other countries like Balkans and European countries. So it's like open, direct aggression. But China is the opposite. China doesn't use so many aggressive messages. It also uses indirect, cautious messages when it talks about other countries and leaders, but it tries to be more careful, I would say, and more diplomatic. And of course, the big difference is that China is more powerful economically. It's the second largest economy in the world, and Russia is declining step by step. And the last one is that Russia uses a word antagonism toward the West, NATO, and the European Union. It's very hostile, and it like doesn't hide its intentions and messages, and it's like openly aggressive. But China tries to balance at the same time. Of course, China doesn't like what the US does or Europe does, but it tries to balance and it tries to be careful because, again, it doesn't want to risk its economic development. And in my conclusion, I would like to say that China tries to keep distance from Russia more and more as Russia is becoming more isolated. China is more careful and diplomatic in the geopolitical arena than Russia. Russia is dependent on China a lot, and it's not an equal alliance. Also, China doesn't want to destroy its economic growth, but it still wants to use Russia for its benefits. That's why China doesn't directly oppose Russia, and it doesn't directly support Ukraine. Thank you so much for your attention, and I would be glad to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bhavna. I see there is no question probably. Yeah, but all participants, thank you for your presentation. It was really insightful, and I guess we'll move on then, since there is no questions. So there another young researcher who is willing to take the floor today. So Ms. Hafak, please go on.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So right now I'm gonna share my screen, and it would be so nice if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
If everything all right. So yes, so I may start.
Yeah,
So
you
good
can
day
start.
once again, esteemed participants. First, I would like to express my utmost gratitude for your presentation and your works, which highlighted not only topical but also very important topics for the world's future, and I'm very enjoyed it. So my name is Olena Havyek, and I'm 16 years old student from Kremenchuk Lyceum number 10. And today I want to present my research, which can be expanded and refined in the future, I suppose. So the topic of my work is China's relations with neighboring countries, managing territorial disputes and promoting stability, regional stability. So, yes, it would be nice. So the importance of China as an economic and political player in the world arena gave rise my interest in studying this topic. So China basically is truly one of the most important and influential countries at the international level. After all, during the reformation actions initiated by Deng Xiaoping, China achieved considerable success in foreign policy and foreign economic spheres in various world regions. So the reforms gradually moved China away from a planned economy, we can say so, and Maoist ideology, opened it up to foreign investments and technologies, and also introduced its workforce to the world market, thereby lifting 1 billion people out of poverty and transforming China into one of the world's largest economies. So this also reflected in participation China in various political formats, unions, and organizations as well, with the aim of ensuring peace and security. In particular, China is one of the members of the United Nations and permanent members of the Security Council, which allows the country to participate and influence on important decisions affecting the world's order. In addition, China is one of the signatories of the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or in short, NPT, actively supporting efforts to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and prevent their use. It was nothing other activities of the PRC, in particular the Global Infrastructure Development Strategy, adopted by the PRC government in 2013 to invest in almost 70 countries and international organization as well, which is called the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. In order to improve ties with its neighboring countries and promote stability in the region, China has strongly advocated for regional cooperation as well, something like cooperation programs. China's participation in a regional organization, such as ASEAN, for example, demonstrates and confirms it. Moreover, it illustrates how these activities affect regional security, economic cooperation, and confidence-building measures, and so on and so forth. So let's move forward. In order to better understand the reasons for China's conflicts with neighboring countries and neighboring territories, it's worth considering the factors of foreign policy. Therefore, foreign policy is based on several aspects, which are the creation of an attractive appearance in parallel with the coercion of neighbors for economic cooperation, and also opposition to geopolitical competitors. This logic is determined of China's desire to avoid restraint of its economic development by neighboring states or countries, which largely depends on its legitimacy and reputation in international arena as well. The PRC carefully protects its image in the world states, for example, actively financing various projects, generously helping developing economies, and closely monitoring the implementation of this project. That is why China needs to ensure peaceful coexistence with its neighbors in order to focus on economic development and also effectively deal with its internal problems that can lead to instability and social upheaval. So if we are talking about conflicts, then after the reform of China, negotiation became and remain today an effective tool of Chinese diplomacy in building and regulating international relations, which allows them to achieve significant diplomatic and trade victories. In partnership relation, China applies three very important factors, arising from their national characteristic as well. In particular, they are based on parity, under which countries will treat each other as equals. At the same time, relations must be peaceful. Cooperation, consultation, the sort of mutual benefit, or the point of coincidence or closeness of mutual interest. These are tools of partnerships that China used. The third characteristic is feature is overcoming difference in social order, or we can say so in ideology, and striving for the maximum realization of common interests and aspirations. However, despite the humaneness of China's approaches, there is still a large number of conflicts with China, with their neighboring countries or territories. They can pose a threat to the region. Relatively, they can be divided into the following categories. The first one is the sea conflicts or the sea disputes, namely disputes in South and East China Sea and in the Yellow Sea as well. Border disputes or border conflicts, it's, for example, disputes with India, Vietnam, and so on and so forth. And we can separate disputes with other countries and territories, including in which Taiwan. As already mentioned, today there are quite a lot of conflicts with China. So if we consider the skirmishes at sea, then it is in the Yellow Sea and the East China Sea. China has exclusive economic zone disputes with North Korea and South Korea as well in the Yellow Sea. It also has some exclusive economic zone disputes with South Korea and Japan, but in the East China Sea. Furthermore, it lays claim over the Senkaku and Diaoyu Island of Japan in the East China Sea. So the next one is the South China Sea dispute. China is claiming almost the whole territory of the reserved South China Sea based on the historic rights. It is currently taking effort to militarize this region. So the South China Sea is one of the busiest maritime trade routes that serve, if I'm not mistaken, a passage for annual trade worth $3.5 trillion. So China has island and maritime boundary disputes with Taiwan, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, and Vietnam as well, in the South China Sea and its extension. It also has disputes over least partly Iceland with Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, and so on and so forth. Pressel Islands with Vietnam, Scarborough Shoal with Philippines, and also with Gulf of Tonkin with Vietnam. Continuing about the South China Sea, it's worth noting China's efforts to peacefully resolve these disputes. For example, with Vietnam, the situation between China and Vietnam over a boundary dispute in the South China Sea is an example of a peaceful resolution of a territorial disputes, because China and Vietnam have competing territorial claims to some of the regions, archipelags, and maritime territories. So they signed the agreement between the people of Republic of China and the Socialist Republic of Vietnam on the delimitation, economic zones, and continental shelves of the two countries in Weber Gulf and Bagbo Gulf. It was signed in 2000. This contract codifies the parties' commitment to resolve conflicts peacefully and without resorting to force. But we have to note the controversial nature of this aspect. So the second one is India dispute. So border conflicts, particularly in the Ladakh region, have caused tension between China and India relationships. So within its territory, India is building roads, highways, and bridges near China. And China fears that this infrastructure project would make the Indian military more dominant in this region. So India's spending on infrastructure projects along the LAC has tripled over the last 5 or 6 years. And the standoff with China has failed to make India stop this project. So India border road strategy involves Darbuk-Shuk-DBO road. So in short, it will be DSDBO road. The top priority project is located in the eastern Ladakh sector connecting to the Leh. This project is objected by China as the road gives India easy access to the section Tibet-Xinjiang highway that passed through Askaiching. So this highway also connected DBO, a military base that has the world's highest airstrip. This DBO, in short, is vital for empowering the armed forces involved in defending the LAC. So the last of the numerous conflicts with China is the conflict with Taiwan. It across out political, historical, and also territorial issues between China and the island nation of Taiwan. So China claims sovereignty over Taiwan and considers it an internal part of its territory. Because historically, Taiwan was part of the Republic of China, but in 1949, after the defeat in the Civil War, a part of the nationalist army related to Taiwan retreated for Taiwan, where it established the nationalist Chinese government. Since then, China has sought to bring Taiwan back under its rule and claims that resolving the unification issues in one of its main strategic goals. So in this time, Taiwan has a separate government, their own independence, if we can say so, and territorial sovereignty. And this is becoming the key priorities for the islands people. So the Taiwanese government regularly emphasized the preservation of its identity and demographic values, and seeks international recognition, and also call for participation in the international organization. So it is also important to note methods of resolving conflicts by China. So it includes diplomatic, economic, and cultural factors. There appear in the solution options, and it's good. China resolves territorial conflicts with neighboring nations, countries, and territories through diplomatic contact and discussion. So we can say it's negotiation process. At the same time, China respects its partners' cultural traits and works to foster confidence and collaboration based on common values and historical links. However, despite this, China does not exclude the possibility of using coercive apparatus and military forces as well, if it can be necessary. Because of this, the issues of security in the region and China's role in it is quite important. So in conclusion, China's connection with neighboring nations, countries, and territories, as well as its efforts to resolve territorial disputes, have a significant impact on the regional stability and as well as international relations. China exhibits its commitment to preserving peaceful ties with its neighbors by adopting peaceful conflict resolution procedures, participating in regional cooperation projects, and promoting economical interdependence. However, obstacles persist, and further measures are needed to preserve long-term stability and create a cooperative regional order. Understanding China's approach to regional security is critical for global players seeking to participate constructively and achieve more secure and prosperous future. Thank you so much for your attention. I would be really grateful to answer all your questions, but I have some problem with my internet connection, so I hope everything was all right. Like, you can type your question into the chat, and I'll definitely answer them. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Ms. Hafak. So, dear colleagues, do you have any questions to Ms. Elena? Well, I see none, and as you can see, no one is putting some questions to the chat. So probably we'll move on. Thank you, Ms. Fak. It was a really great and expert level presentation. Thank you for this insightful presentation. So, dear colleagues, we have covered all the prepared topics, and now you can ask your final questions, if any, and we'll move on to the closing. So we have received a question from Mr. Lavrenko, and it's a question to Ms. Elena Hafak. How do you see a future position of China in a war itself?
Okay, so if it's question to me, yes, I get it right. So especially for me, it's currently really difficult to answer this question properly, correctly, and objectively, because I'm not haven't got right qualification to answer your question. I'm really sorry. If you ask my honest opinion, I think China might really pay attention to its approach and definitely change some opinions on some situation. But if you want to receive more information, you can look through some works of researchers. I can name it to the chat if it would be all right for you. Please notify me, but I'd like you to report some researchers, for example, Belarus, it's our national researcher, or Bayenkova. It would be really helpful for you. So yeah, I'm really thankful for your question, and I consider it would be nice for me to answer in Ukrainian as well, if it's okay, because its question was typed in Ukrainian.
Mishika, you can put your answer in a chat in Ukrainian,
Okay, yes.
and also you can provide
Okay.
all the materials you have mentioned in a chat. And just to give some more perspectives regarding the question we have received, probably in recent years, China has become a major player in the global arena, and its rise has had a significant impact on the world order. So as a second largest economy and a major trading partner for many countries, Chinese action play an important role in the global economy. And while China has experienced significant economic growth and development in recent decades, it also faces some challenges in areas such as growing income inequality and pollution and aging population. So China continues to navigate these and other challenges, and it will need to find ways to balance its economic development with social and environmental concerns. And in terms of its global role, China is focused on expanding its influence and promoting its interests, as we have heard from today's speakers, particularly in Asia and Africa. And it also has invested in infrastructure and development projects in many countries. And, well, as we have heard, specifically in a Belt and Road Initiative as a central part of this effort. So just to give some more insights, since question is kind of broad to my opinion. Dear colleagues, since I see no other questions, we'll probably reach our moment of close. I will kindly ask you to check if you have fulfilled the Google form so you can receive your certificate of participation. If there is some question regarding the form itself, please kindly raise your hand or put a question in a chat. I will assist you regarding this problem. And yes, so to the closing part, we are really grateful to have you there, and we hope that we will see you in our upcoming events as well. We are preparing already some of them. You will be notified by the emails you have provided us with. And yes, I hope you have enjoyed this event and you have found some interesting insights for your future research, or just for your your thoughts and for maybe your future projects. So please stay in touch with us, and we will be happy to see you on our upcoming events as well. Thank you.